Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. Today's video is Monroe Astral Projection Techniques. But right before we get into that, I just want to mention that if anyone is interested in becoming a supportive patron of Astral Club, there will be a link in the description and your contributions are very much appreciated. Robert Monroe. I would imagine that many of the people listening to this video are well aware of Robert Monroe. I consider him the father of modern astral projection, and we have mentioned him before in videos. Real briefly, he was a very successful businessman in radio and television. He first started writing about OBEs in 1971 with the groundbreaking Journeys Out of the Body. Now, he began experiencing astral projections, or OBEs, in 1958, long before he had actually got involved in writing the book. At first, he was confused by this newfound talent, and you can certainly imagine why. I mean, he was born in 1915. So by the time 1958 rolled around, he was a mature adult, and suddenly he found himself confronted with these odd experiences. If you take a look at his autobiography, what had happened was, I guess he'd had a brunch with his family. And when he returned, he decided to lie down. He was suddenly seized by cramps. His first thought was that he was suffering from food poisoning, so he stayed in bed all day and rested. The same thing happened 3 weeks later. But during this attack, he started going through the vibrational phase. His whole body began vibrating. And these weird vibrations would continue to plague him for months afterwards. He went to his family doctor, and the doctor did all these tests and ran an EEG, and they couldn't find anything wrong with Mr. Monroe. Now, not too long after that examination experience, he laid down and his arm was draped by his sides, and he actually said that it was near the rug. That's how much the arm was draping down. He passed into a daydream, and not too long after that, he experienced his first astral projection. It was a typical newbie astral projection. He reported floating against the ceiling and bouncing gently with any movement he made. He rolled in the air, looked down, saw his body lying there along with his wife. And very quickly after that, he became a little concerned about what was going on, thought he might be dying, and he dove down back into his body. So here you are, a mature adult, having this weird experience in 1958, having no previous knowledge of anything like this, yet he's confronted with this very odd occurrence. And after this occurred, he was concerned. He actually visited a psychologist, and the psychologist must have been very open-minded because he recommended that Monroe read about Eastern philosophy. Well, Monroe did that, and he just wasn't satisfied. He was also a very scientific-minded man. I think he needed more. And anyway, these incidents, OBEs, continued to happen, and he ended up going to the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute in 1964. He met several of the staff there in hopes of learning more about his problem. They, of course, knew nothing about OBEs, and they weren't really helpful. Luckily for him, however, he learned about parapsychology at about the same time, and that gave him the clue he needed to really start investigating the experience. Now, I could spend a whole video just talking about Mr. Monroe, but what's important is that he became so interested in this that he gathered together other like-minded people, many of them scientists and professional people, and he opened up an institute, the Monroe Institute, and he created that in the 70s. And it's in Faber, Virginia, a very beautiful area in the foothills of the Blue Mountains. I had the luck to visit there for a number of courses in the mid-'80s. Recently, I found some notes that I had taken from some of those courses concerning the Monroe techniques. I also had the honor to meet Robert Monroe and to have a discussion with him, which is one of the most memorable discussions of my life. I'll never forget that to this day. But what I'd like to do is to share his techniques, the Monroe techniques for astral projecting with you today, and perhaps they will shed some light and perhaps help you to increase your projections or to actually start them. Now, I recall before we get to the techniques that Monroe also discussed some important points before astral projection, or OBEs as he liked to refer to them, actually begin. He said that we all needed to realize that the OBE, the out-of-the-body experience, the astral projection, was not an alien experience. It was actually native. It was part of the human potential, and that we needed to understand that what we were doing was part of the human evolutionary process, and it was something that we needed to discover or rediscover to actually to be able to achieve the true potential of our individual selves, and also ourselves as a race of humans. He stressed that it was important to have a certain degree of psychological strength. After first leaving the body, you can be subject to time periods where you can do a lot of astral projecting, a lot of OBEs. It can be a strain on the physical, mental, and spiritual being. And he also said, and I remember this, it had a lot of effect on the other students, although it didn't really on me because I had been projecting for years. But he said that once you started projecting, that you can never fully close that door again, that a door was opened and it would always continue to be open. So he stressed that you needed to be sure that this was something that you truly wanted to do. Because he said in the environment that we are in today, and I think it has changed a little more favorably, but there's still an awful lot of skeptics and people who will treat you as a freak, as insane, perhaps a liar, and even many of your own friends and relatives might doubt your validity and you know, the actuality of your experiences. So he said that you had to be prepared for a certain amount of ostracism. I think it's important to know who you're talking to and not to force your experiences on others. People often ask me, how do you deal with skeptics? It's very easy. I don't. I'm not here to convince anyone against their will. You know, the old saying, those convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. I'm not here to convince skeptics. I'm here to help those who wish to experience astral projection and to understand the true potential of this ability. I'm not going to waste my time trying to prove to pedantic individuals that such a thing exists. I have no interest in doing that. Monroe also talked about fear, and he called it the fear barrier. He said that that was probably the number one resistance that was thrown up by the projector himself, and that he knew no surefire way to get through the fear barrier other than just taking cautious initial steps to create a familiarity bit by bit. And I have said in the past that knowledge, reading the books, non-fear-based books, watching videos, that education is a good way to help lower that fear barrier. And that's part of what I do here by broadcasting these videos, so that people can understand that what they're experiencing is real and that it's safe and it's actually natural, and that there need be no fear for your survival. Okay, let's get into the actual techniques that Robert Monroe discussed during some of these classes that I had way back in the ancient days in the mid-'80s. He said, step 1, relax the body. According to Monroe, the ability to relax is the first prereq. If you're not relaxed, you can't even go any further than that. He said it's necessary for both mental and physical relaxation. I don't recall him getting into any specific exercises, but I believe that very basic meditation could help you achieve that state. I've also used myself in times of high stress the deep breathing exercise while lying on my bed. You breathe deeply in through your nose, and then gradually you expel the breath in a long breath out the mouth. While doing that, you have the progressive muscular relaxation, or PMR. And we've gone over that in previous videos, but real briefly, you start exercising, or you start exercising, I guess is the best word, the various muscle groups, and you strain them, and then you let them loose. So you start with your toes, and then you work your way all the way up to the top of your head. And each time you let go of that muscle group, you also kind of picture your astral body kind of going a little out of coincidence with your physical body. So that's one particular one. There are many exercises and meditations out there. Use whichever one helps you to relax. And then he said the next step, or step 2, and I remember he said nearly all great astral projectors have noted that OBEs seem to be related to that curious state between walking and sleeping, which is known as the hypnagogic state. And this is essentially a state where the body is asleep, but the mind is awake. And when you can tell when you're in the hypnagogic state, and I'm sure most of you have probably experienced it at one time. I recall when I was a child, I was lying on my bed and suffering through one of my periodic periods of insomnia, and I suddenly saw cartoons flashing right above my head while I lie there in bed. And I idly wondered, oh, how cool is this? I can watch a cartoon. I remember it was a Popeye cartoon. There was no sound, but they were going through the motions, and it was quite interesting. What that was is I was in the hypnagogic state. My eyes were open. However, my body had fallen asleep, and I had gone into an altered state. And in this state, my subconscious mind essentially came up to meet my conscious mind. So I was generating a simple dream while I was partially conscious. This happened one other time during a long period of insomnia. This one was a bit more scary. I was driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike on the east-west extension, and I hadn't slept in days. And of course, I still went to work and everything. And as I was driving, suddenly there was a TV show that was playing on my windshield. And I idly thought, this is pretty cool that my car can broadcast this TV show on the windshield. And it was weird because I could see the road as I drove down, and this show was superimposed in between me and my windshield. Luckily, after a couple of seconds, I realized, I was conscious enough to realize that this isn't good because I'm driving here, and I was able to come back to full consciousness. But that gives you an example of a typical hypnagogic state. So we've relaxed the body. Now we're entering that state where we're bordering sleep. And another key that you might realize is that perhaps in the past you've had someone wake you up and you say, oh, I wasn't asleep. And they say, oh, yes, you were. That's because you were in that hypnagogic state. You might have even moved a little bit. You thought you were asleep. They thought you were asleep, whereas you weren't completely asleep. There's that weird in-between state. So we've all experienced it before, and this is important to get to that state. And that's why I've mentioned in the past that one of the ideal ways to astral project is to Make your suggestions to astral project as you're falling asleep. Because if you get that message to the subconscious, then perhaps you can harness that weird hypnagogic state and then use that to actually project. Now, Mr. Monroe also mentioned that this wouldn't be necessarily easy to achieve, and the only way to actually get control over it is to repeatedly do it over and over again and get better and better, because you will fall asleep, probably to start off with, and you'll wake up eventually, you'll be a little upset, but the best way is just don't be discouraged, and eventually you will note more and more of what the signposts are of, okay, I can tell I'm getting relaxed, I can tell I'm heading into the hypnagogic state, and I can tell I'm going to head off to sleep. And the more you're aware of these different stages, the more you can control those different stages, the better off you are. I've always said that people who anyone can astral project, I seriously believe, if you are devoted to doing so and are willing to put in the time and the effort, I believe it can be done. However, there are certain people that I think can do it easier than others. My insomnia has been a plague to me over the years, but it's given me more of a control over my sleep state. My wife often hits the pillow and is out immediately. People who sleep sounding like that, it's great. I'm sure it's great for them. But if you want to astral project, it just makes it a lot more difficult, because trying to control that sleep state process is very difficult for them, because they literally just hit the pillow, the lights get turned out, and that's it. So I'm not saying that someone like that can't astral project. I'm just saying that you're going to have to practice a little bit more than someone who sometimes struggles falling to sleep. Because the other good side of people like myself is that you're used to the different stages of sleep, because they're agonizingly slow for you. So at least there's one good point that you can take advantage of. It's a better way. It's easier for you to astral project. One exercise you can do to help harness the hypnagogic state is when you lie down to sleep, hold a single mental image in your mind as long as you can. When other images start popping spontaneously into your mind, and they will, you have entered the hypnagogic state. So if you sit there and say, I am going to keep this old wooden chest I have in my home, and I want to keep that image in my mind, and you do so, and then the next thing you know, your next door neighbor is opening up the chest and pulling out a silk dress. And you're saying, why, how wonderful you look in that silk dress. Okay, you're in the hypnagogic state at that point in time. Now, the next step, step 3, he called Deepen the State, or Deepen the Hypnagogic State. Bob Monroe advised that the student learns how to deepen the hypnagogic state as a prerequisite to leaving the body. Now, he said, as soon as you enter the state of hypnagogia, don't think of anything, but remain poised between wakefulness and sleep. He said, simply look through your closed eyelids at the blackness ahead of you. Do nothing more. After a number of these exercises, you may hallucinate, have mind pictures or light patterns. These are basically of no significance. They're just forms of what he called neural discharge. However, when those images cease, Monroe said the best thing you can do is just allow the awareness of your body and all sensory stimulation to leave, to go away. And at that point, you are almost in a void, which your only source of stimulation will be your own thoughts. Now you are now in a very deep hypnagogic state, yet you have still maintained consciousness. Once again, this won't be easy, and you'll probably have to try and fail a number of times before you actively achieve this particular situation. And then at step 4, you enter into a state of vibration, or what we would call the vibratory phase. This is the most important part, Monroe said. And he said it's also, I remember he said it was the most opaque, or the hardest to see. Many people who have undergone OBEs have noted that curious vibrations, and many of us have experienced that vibrational onset. And these vibrations can manifest in a variety of amplitudes, from a mild tingling sensation to that feeling that electricity is being shot through your body. Luckily, I have never experienced any pain or discomfort from this phase, and I've never heard of anyone else who experienced it as a painful situation, just as a very curious one. And when you hit that vibrational state, if it's a very severe one, you may feel like the bed's jumping up and down. It's not the bed, it's you. It's your astral body that's jumping in and out of your physical body. And so, since it's still very much in periodic coincidence with your physical self translates that basic experience of your astral body bouncing in and out as a physical sensation. So it feels like the bed is hopping up and down, when in reality it's really your astral self that is hopping up and down, and your physical body is just trying to interpret these very weird signals. Now, I know that Monroe had a number of conditions that he said was necessary to proceed into the vibrational state, and from there into a full OBE. Some of these we've talked about before, but I think it'll be interesting to go over them. One was remove all jewelry and all other accoutrements from that are currently touching your skin. And we talked about that just recently. Jewelry will interfere with this process. He said darken the room, but don't make it so dark that there's not any light. Now, I remember he said, have your body along that north-south axis with your head towards magnetic north. I don't recall him giving any specific instructions as to why. And I've shared my experiments. I've never had any, I can never associate any association with magnetic north with any more astral projections. If you want to experiment, go ahead. Next, he said, loosen all clothing. Make sure you're warm, but not too warm. You don't want to be cold either. Be sure you're in a location where you won't be disturbed. Enter that deep relaxation state. Give yourself a mental suggestion that you remember everything that occurs in the upcoming session, and that'll be beneficial to you. And we've talked about this before. This saying that I used to say to myself as I fell asleep, and when I intended to astral project. And for people who are new, I'll go over it real briefly for you. I've got it memorized. I would say to myself, tonight as I fall asleep, my mind will come awake. I will leave my body, go where I wish to go, do whatever I wish to do, and when I return, I will awake and have a full memory of everything that occurred. And while you're saying those words, you must also picture yourself doing that. That's very important, because we want this information not only to be in the conscious mind, and the conscious mind loves words, but the subconscious mind needs images so that it can get the basic idea. So I know there are people who have something called aphasia, or aphantasia is what it's actually called, and they have difficulty actually imagining things, so that it makes them a little bit difficult to actually astral project, because they have a hard time visualizing things like I just told you. But luckily, most people don't have that problem. So that's something that you definitely want to do. And he says, breathe freely through your half-open mouth. I've also breathed through my nose. As you breathe, concentrate on the void in front of you. Select a point about a foot away from your forehead. Then change your point of mental reference to 6 feet. So you're getting ready to project. And so you're causing this distance change from a foot to 6 feet away. And then he said, focus on reaching out for the vibrations at that point. Bring them back into your body. And then you can roll out through will or float out. What have you. He went on to step 5, where he talked about learning to control the vibrational state. After learning how to achieve this state, now you can begin to explore all the different factors associated with it. And we've talked about how it feels. It feels like a mild electrical field going through you, or it can feel like a major electrical field going through you. It can feel like there's a wave, like your bed is becoming some sort of a wave situation, or it could feel like it's jumping up and down, or that your bed is shaky, or that you're even being shaken by an earthquake. And it's true. I've even experienced that myself. So just be aware that any one of these is indicating a deepening vibrational state. At step 6, he talked about beginning your partial separation. And the key here is thought control. You have to keep your mind firmly focused on the idea of leaving your body. Do not let it wander. Stray thoughts can cause you to lose control of the state. So that's extremely, extremely important. Next, you have to exert your second body, which is what he called the astral body, and then push out slowly, or whatever works for you. If you can find yourself floating out, or as a kid, I used to roll out of bed because it's a very natural thing for kids to do. You roll out of bed. So that's what I would do. And that was step 6. Now, step 7, he said, disassociate yourself from your body, which is, of course, now we're in a full projection. And so once you are out, he then mentions a number of other techniques, which he calls rotation, he called rollout, and I've already talked about the rollout previously. But you have to, it's a very weird way to try to describe it when you're leaving your body, but if you're leaving your body from the vibrational state, you can't physically move. If you physically move, you will dispel the state. So you have to, it has to be your astral body that leaves. And so you have to separate yourself through that force of will without moving your physical body. So that was, those were some of the notes that I had taken for what was considered the Monroe basic projection technique. And as I said, many of these things that he talked about weren't new because I had been projecting for a very long time. But it was great to be among other people who had this same weird interest that I did, because I'd met very few people in my life, one being a girlfriend that I had in college, but and a few other people. But it was something that felt good to be in a place where astral projection, OBEs, were acknowledged as a real and natural phenomena, and where there wasn't any, skepticism constantly being thrown around. So, and of course, being in the presence of the great Robert Monroe, the modern father of astral projection, was a great honor. And I wish everybody could do that today. Unfortunately, Mr. Monroe passed away quite a while ago, but his Monroe Institute is still in Faber, Virginia. And it is available for courses. Now, during the coronavirus, they're not offering the personal on-site courses. They're only offering the online courses, which is a shame, I think, because being in that place it's just such a serene and a beautiful place, and I just think it adds to the whole experience. So, if you want to take an online experience, fine. It's actually cheaper than being obviously somewhere physically, because normally you're in the middle of nowhere. Faber, Virginia is in the middle of nowhere. And so they provide you with a room which you share with someone else, and they provide good, nourishing food and what have you. But unfortunately, because of COVID, that's not occurring right now. So just be aware of that. Okay, well, I hope everyone enjoyed the Monroe astral projection techniques, and I'd like to thank all of my patrons. I'm extremely grateful. I can't believe that I'm getting the support that I can get, or that I am getting on for Astral Club. Jerry's son is Astral Ascended. Jean Ming Mei is an Astral Scout. Pete Lovick is an Astral Master. Kat Walker is an Astral Scout. Ahmed Ali is Astral Ascended. Michael Payo is an Astral Master. Brooke Rum is an Astral Master. Natalie is an Astral Master. And Vanessa Morel is an Astral Scout. So thank you very much. And if you're interested or feel moved to contribute to the Patreon for Astral Club, the link is in the description. If you liked this video, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell so that you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And please continue to leave your questions and comments. I enjoy them very much, and so does everybody else. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.